This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg in South Africa. I'm Emeritus. The show is always live and it's broadcast from our studios here in Auckland Park. Don't forget, we're also streaming live on YouTube right now, with the whole show available later on demand on our YouTube channel. Now today, Julius Malema's case was struck off the roll at the Polokwane High Court yesterday, but the EFF leader is not out of the woods just yet. We talk eco-mobility with the Johannesburg mayor, and we ask him if the citizens in this city will heed the call to go without a car for a full month. So our question of the day: can South Africans go without a car for a full month in our inner cities? You can interact with us at SABC Newsroom. You can send the mayor a question. I'll ask him that question if you send us a question through. Also, we look at the new biometric evaluation for RDP homeowners. Later, we have retirement concerns, labour broking, and conclude with the lion case that's in court in Zimbabwe today. But first, let's get the day's news from Anine Dormel.
Morning, I'm Anine Dormel. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. 3,000 ANC Women's League members will today descend on Irene east of Pretoria for their long-awaited National Congress. The Congress will elect a new leadership for the organisation for the next 5 years. It will also discuss issues including human trafficking, women in business and the feminisation of poverty. The Congress is nearly 15 months overdue, but the League's Secretary General Sisisi Tolashe says it's all systems go for today.
All our provinces are coming, our membership has grown, our branches has grown. Yes, out of 9 provinces, we are sure 8 of them are really, all structures are in place, except for Western Cape.
The ANC has once again renewed its call for a state-owned mining company. This has emerged during a debate on the state of the mining industry and its sustainability. It also comes amidst deadlock wage negotiations in the mining sector. Yesterday, Mine Workers Union AMCU said it wants more than 1,000 Rand increase, which employers have tabled as a final offer. Arguments in the case between the National Assembly Speaker as well as Ahang Cope and the UDM will continue in the High Court in Cape Town today. The applicants want Baleka Mbete to be declared unfit to hold office. They also want a secret ballot to be allowed when voting takes place after a motion of no confidence in President Jacob Zuma. The case against 8 former police officers in the Miro Masia murder trial is set to continue. This is after the 9th accused was acquitted of all charges in the High Court in Pretoria yesterday. The defence in the Masia case says the state was not supposed to continue with charges against the accused because there was never any evidence linking him to the murder of the Mozambican taxi driver. Masia was dragged behind a police van in Davidton, east of Johannesburg in 2013. In Zimbabwe, the professional hunter who led the expedition that killed Cecil the lion is due to stand trial. Theo Bronkhorst is expected to appear on charges of organising an illegal hunt. Bronkhorst has denied any wrongdoing over the hunt in early July when American Walter Palmer paid €50,000 to shoot the lion with a bow and arrow. And in central India, a rescue operation is now underway after 2 trains derailed within minutes of each other. Around more than 20 people have been killed in the incidents. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just search for SABC Newsroom. You can also follow us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Given, over to you.
Thank you very much, Anine. Now, the second Eco-Mobility Festival is set to start from the 1st until the 31st of October this year during South Africa's Transport Month. It will entail a month-long car-free city district for locals and visitors to Johannesburg. During this month-long festival, certain streets in the Sandton CBD will be closed off, and instead of additional public transport, opportunities for people to walk and cycle in and around Sandton will be arranged. These streets will then be used to host street fairs, exhibitions, cycle rides and so forth to promote eco-mobility. The aim is to prove that public transport, walking and cycling is possible, safe, affordable and even healthy, as well as a contributor to a more sustainable world. Now, we're fortunate to have the Mayor of Johannesburg with us this morning, Mr. Parkstar. Very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much and good morning.
I put a question out on social media to our viewers, and the question is, can South Africans go without a car for a full month in our inner cities? No, you're obviously confident of that, but do you believe that the people in Johannesburg can overcome their what I think sometimes a fear of public transport and walking and running and cycling?
I believe that we need to encourage and induce different behavior. The reality is that we're experiencing high levels of congestion in Sandton in particular, where you have peak traffic volumes of people that get up to 150,000 people, passenger trips during the peak periods. That is 60% private car usage in Sandton, and experiencing increasing levels of congestion, and we need to induce different behavior. We have already started investing in the long term in relation to building dedicated public transport routes in Sandton and creating the ability for people to commute in areas such as Sandton with greater ease, so that you reduce the burden and pressure of people trying to get to work and to other places for either entertainment, shopping, or other purposes that they visit Sandton. So we think that Eco-Mobility Month is not just about the celebration of the month. It is the beginning of a process of an integrated transport plan for Sandton that tries to look at the reality that we're not going to build ourselves out of the problem. So we need to encourage different behavior and the ability to use different modes of transport.
You mentioned congestion as a reason. Are there other reasons why you've chosen Sandton? Is it maybe a sort of a landmark area that can convince people it can work elsewhere?
Well, two other reasons I think are important. The first is that we are contributing towards promoting eco-mobility in particular, because the use of private vehicles is one of the major causes of greenhouse gas emissions. As the city of Johannesburg, we've been active and have committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, both in terms of the interventions we're making in relation to transportation, but also in terms of the use of energy systems and different interventions. So both mitigating and adaptation measures that we're putting in place to address the impact of congestion. And we think that it is important that we do something about it. Now saying greenhouse gas emissions, because the reality is that Johannesburg per capita is one of the highest emitters of greenhouse gas emissions. Whilst business has taken conscious decisions with regards to building green buildings, we need to now look at other alternatives. So it's not just about addressing the problem through green buildings. We also need to address it through looking at eco-mobile solutions. And you would have observed that the new fleet of Metrobus that we're rolling out is now propelled through a dual fuel system. It's a hybrid between gas and diesel, with the emphasis being on gas. There isn't adequate gas to ensure that it's 100% gas. So we're saying, let's have a hybrid until such time that we can fully convert to gas as a means of propelling our vehicles. So we're looking at that as a solution, but we're also looking at creating opportunities for people to walk and cycle. The number of people that walk in Sandton, think about the 10,000 people that walk over the Grayston Drive Bridge just to access Sandton during peak hour from Alexandra to Sandton. These are 10,000 people that need adequate opportunity to be able to access Sandton. The number of people that are on their bicycles, many of those who are cyclists cycle very early in the morning, put the bicycle behind their car, get to the place where they cycle around, and then put the bicycle back on their car. There are so many people that want the opportunity to have access to safe cycling routes, and we need to promote it as part of the eco-mobile solutions.
Before, when I learned that I was going to be speaking to you about this, I went on the cycling routes, and I have to commend you for fantastic work done. The one issue that we will battle with as a city altogether, I think, is compliance. There's still a certain element within our residency in Johannesburg that don't want to see this and that don't want to comply, and the behavior, they don't want to change the way that they behave now. How are you going to how are you going to ensure that you assist them in changing or in seeing the light, if there's such a thing?
If you think about it this way, we're all pedestrians at one point or another. You need to walk from one place to your car. So you do need safe spaces in which to walk or cycle or use alternative modes of transport. We look at it this way. I mean, we introduced a policy 2 years ago that we call complete streets. And the idea of complete streets is to say, if you look at the public spaces that we have as a city, the bulk of the public space actually goes to private cars, and that's inequitable use of public assets. We think that complete streets should be about streets that are accessible, equitably accessible to vehicles, to public transportation, to cyclists and to pedestrians, so that in fact these alternatives are available to people and we're able to utilize our infrastructure more effectively. If you think about it, we can use these public spaces, particularly in more residential roads, for purposes of recreation, depending on what you do in the streets. So we need to create different uses for our streets. They are internationally recognized best practices with regards to complete streets as a means of using public infrastructure more optimally. And we need to change our orientation. The majority of people in this city do not use private cars to access their places of work. They have to use public transportation. Yeah. Many of them walk or cycle to work. And this is about creating equity for everybody. And those that use public transport actually have to walk between one place to their mode of transportation. And even those that use cars generally do become pedestrians at one point or another. It's about changing our orientation and creating an environment in which we can access our city in a manner that creates greater ease, reduces pressure on us. So it's not just reducing pressure on the roads, it's about reducing pressure on us as citizens and being able to say, I can reach one point to the next in 30 minutes as opposed to 2 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a fantastic idea. The Eco Mobility Festival is taking place from the 1st until the 31st of October. I thank you for joining us, Mr. Mayor. I think it's a wonderful initiative that you're putting together here in the city. I've gone to test it, the first prognosis, as it were. It looks really good. And we will continue to call on citizens to buy into the idea of eco-mobility. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Now, of course, the fraud and corruption trial against Julius Malema and his co-accused Lesiba Gwangwa and Kagiso Dijabe was struck off the roll in the High Court in Polokwane yesterday. Here are some of your views on social media around the court case. At SABC Newsroom is where, of course, you can interact with. Mama Loko says, High Court's decision to have Julius Malema's corruption case struck off the roll is a political victory for him than a legal victory. Well, it's not done yet. He's going to go back to court on this matter. He's not acquitted. The matter is simply struck off the roll. There's no proof of innocence, says Mgazi. Yes, that is a sober view because the MPA has said they will make sure that the matter goes back to court. At Kati says, Malema corruption and fraud case struck off the court roll. Congratulations in order, Commander-in-Chief. Now we can hold number one to account. Yes. Katekani says, I didn't want Julius Malema to go down, but I'm very disappointed at the quality of the prosecutor the MPA has. That one from Katekani. Of course, very much on everyone's mind, the discussion around that. The MPA has pointed out it might have been struck off the roll for continued postponements, but they will be back in court. Julius Malema will be back in court to face these charges. Now, let's take a look at the picture of the day. Now, it comes from a broad Belfast, captioned, Brooklyn sinkhole. Massive hole swallows a New York intersection. Hey, look at that picture. And here in South Africa, we love to complain about the potholes, don't we? If that was in South Africa, somebody would have filled it with water, taken a bath, and put the pictures on social media to tell us all how bad our infrastructure is here in South Africa. There you have sinkhole the size of an Olympic-sized swimming pool in New York. Let's take a look now at the front pages from around the globe. We start in Europe. The Times reports that the child abuse inquiry into Edward Heath widened yesterday with investigations by 4 police forces. Scotland Yard rejected a central claim last night, saying that an investigation would be disproportionate. Wow. Moving to New York. Wall Street Journal says exporters and haulers on both sides of the English Channel worry that the Calais crisis is eating into their revenues and are putting more pressure on the French and the United Kingdom. Finally, in the Far East, in China, the South China Morning Post talks about super typhoon Sodolo developed into the world's most powerful storm of the year yesterday as it took aim at Taiwan and the mainland after battering the Northern Marianas. Let's now take a quick look at what's happening around the country here in South Africa. We start in our capital, Pretoria, where the Mido Masia murder trial is set to continue in the High Court, where only 8 accused remain now. Yesterday, the 9th accused was acquitted of all charges. 2 years ago, Masia was dragged behind a police van in Daveyton and later died in a police holding cell. In Cape Town, Seskona People's Rights Movement leader Andile Lili is expected to appear in the Bellville Magistrates Court on charges of inciting violence. He was arrested at the end of July for his statements that criminals should be killed immediately and brutally. And before we go to a break, Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu was discharged from a Cape Town hospital yesterday morning, where he's been under observation and receiving treatment for a persistent infection. His recovery will continue at home. The infection was a consequence of treatment for prostate cancer that the Archbishop received over the past 18 years. The Arch was visited by Reverend Canon Tutu and South Africa's Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Matsoaledi, before he was discharged yesterday. Lovely to see. Time for us to take a break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
When bees and wasps sting a person, they inject a bitterness venom in their skins.
We have about 3 spider species in South Africa that we have to worry about. Button spiders, which include, the black widow spiders, your sac spiders, and your violent spiders.
That venom is in your system, it's in your muscle tissue. And the more your heart beats, the faster your heart beats, the faster the blood is going to circulate, and consequently it's going to get that venom into your system faster.
If you see a snake like this, the best thing to do is to just stay away from it and contact somebody that specializes in removing venomous snakes.
Join me on Health Talk every Saturday morning between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. as we unpack current health stories.
Welcome back here with Newsroom. The case against EFF leader Julius Malema and co-accused Lesiba Gwangwa has been struck off the roll in the High Court sitting in Polokwane. Judge George Motley ruled that the corruption, fraud, money laundering and racketeering case could not be postponed any longer, since it's already been postponed several times. Motley says it would be impractical to continue with the trial in the absence of the third accused, Kagiso Dichabe, who is ill. The judge says the state can reinstate the charges. It's the second time that the courts ruled in favor of Malema after the South African Revenue Service withdrew its case against him earlier this year. But the MPA says it will reinstate charges against the EFF leader because he's not been acquitted in this case. Now, political analyst Elvis Masocha joins us from our studio in Polokwane to talk about the implications of the judge's decision. Good morning to Elvis. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, Ben, good morning to you and all the viewers of SABC News.
Elvis, just give us the implications. How do you view the outcome yesterday?
I was laughing yesterday, yeah, Ben, because the EFF leaders, including the Commander-in-Chief Julius Malema and their supporters, they were celebrating, ululating, beating the drums, celebrating, calling it, a victory. I didn't understand. Was it really a political victory or a political inconvenience? Because in a technical sense, it was just similar to a postponement. Because even the judge said, for now you are free, Mr. Malema, but remember, possibilities are there that they may recharge you. And obviously, it is like a postponement because at any time, the National Prosecuting Authority can announce that, they are recharging or they are going through the case. So there was no any need for Julius Malema to celebrate, even his supporters. I think it was out of context for them to celebrate. It's not even a victory.
These charges will be reinstated. How do you expect this matter to now proceed? You talk about this victory that's been claimed. How do you think the MPA will proceed in this matter now?
But we need to understand one thing. Julius Malema, he's not, a par excellent thinker, but he's a wonderful tactician. He has realized that, these, court, appearances are granting him an opportunity to speak to the masses, to speak to the members and his followers, even to increase the media profile of his own organization. So to a certain extent, his court appearances are similar to him addressing rallies, because even, media publicity for free. You remember when he was appearing, was it on Monday, throngs of journalists, media agencies from different places were there, and it was just receiving free, massive publicity for one thing, and I think he's enjoying that.
Now he's also made a statement, some say a loaded statement, that if found guilty in this case, he would step down. Do you think he would do that if this case continues? And also, if he had to step down, what do you think that would mean to the EFF?
Yeah, Ben, I think that was, a fatal error of judgment on his part, because as a politician, you can't say, I'm facing, a particular case in court, and if I'm found guilty, I will step down as the president of the party. I think, it was, a fatal error of judgment on his part, because a leader can't say that. I think at the same time, he was supposed to have said, the EFF leadership or the organization will decide what happened in case I might find guilty. Remember, to be found guilty doesn't mean you can go to prison. There are options like fine, community service, suspended sentence. So Julius Malema did not understand that context. I think Malema thought to be found guilty, it means you automatically go to prison. That is not the case. There are options and alternatives in terms of sentencing.
What do you think it would mean to the party if that had to happen, if he had to be forced, or if he had to step down?
I don't think, the EFF is totally against, a member or a leader, who has been found guilty to continue to serve within the organization. Remember, one EFF leader, I think it was in Northwest, he has been, facing allegations that he was receiving, monthly salary from the Northwest, provincial legislature while he was languishing in prison. And the EFF approved of such a situation. They even defended that leader who was languishing in prison for receiving monthly salary from the provincial legislature. So I don't think the EFF definitely will disown Julius Malema, even if he can go to prison. I don't think they will disown him.
Elvis, thank you very much for that bright contribution this morning. That's political analyst talking about Julius Malema's court case, man himself, and of course the EFF wider after his corruption, money laundering, racketeering case was thrown off the roll, or struck off the roll at the Polokwane High Court yesterday. That was Elvis Masocha talking to us from Polokwane. Now, in a bid to combat corruption in the issuing of houses, the Gauteng government will soon use biometric verification to allocate RDP houses. This will allow the department to link the authentic homeowner to the house and the title deed using a fingerprint. To date, nearly 2.7 million houses have been built by the state since 1994, and over 1 million of those are here in Gauteng. The province is continuously faced with growing demand for houses as people across the country come to Gauteng to seek better opportunities. Nationally, the housing backlog is estimated to be around 1.5 million. Now, in our studios this morning, we are joined by the Gauteng MEC for Human Settlements, Mr. Jacob Mamapolo. Very good morning to you, Mr. Mamapolo. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning to you and the viewers, and thanks for the opportunity.
Technology really changes the world, doesn't it? Tell us how you see this system working and dealing with the legacy problem we have.
Well, thanks very much. And as you said, the province has indeed made an announcement for this groundbreaking initiative. You'll recall that the provincial government, through the leadership of Premier David Makura, has announced within the vision of what we call transformation, modernization, and reindustrialization of our province. Of course, that is a vision for our province. But within that, for human settlement, the most important thing is that we also have to modernize human settlement over and above transforming the special patterns in our province. That means one of the issues we looked at, and this was based on the outcry we got into the communities, immediately we came in, the majority of the people were saying, we understand building a house is not easy, it's difficult, ourselves can't afford it, but what worries us is we're on the waiting list. We wait for a long time, 1997, 1998, but, and then there are allegations of massive corruption in the allocation of houses, manipulation of waiting beneficiary list. So the introduction of this comprehensive technological solution that we want to pilot and test in our province seeks to respond precisely to the overwhelming outcry about allegations of corruption in the allocation of houses.
When do you expect this system to be implemented and to kick off?
Well, at this point, as we are talking now, I'm pleased that we have already closed to the public the request for bids and proposals, and we have actually started with the first steps in the adjudication process. And before the end of this year, we would have started with the piloting and testing of the system, and I'm quite sure that early next year, it will be the beginning of a new year, and our people should sit comfortably knowing that we will come back to them to say, we think we have found a solution, and you can worry about other things, but not anymore. That where am I on the list? My house was given to somebody else. Houses have been sold to wrong people, and so on and so on.
You mentioned the problems. You talk about the long waiting lists and the expired applications and falsifying paperwork and all that sort of thing. Are you confident going to this kind of paperless environment that you're going to in this technological advancement that you're talking about, that you can overcome all these challenges?
Yes, I think, you know, the big problem that our people face is relate to two things. One is that people go into the department and make an application, register themselves as, I need a house. Then the other most important thing is when we allocate the house. So the reason why I believe the technology is going to help us is because there are steps that we are trying to link with the biometric as a common denominator. And that is first from registration to subsidy application and approval. There's an allocation of a stand number. And there's the house itself, and then there's the title deed. If we don't create consistency across this value chain, it is possible syndicates can manipulate it. So what we're looking for is just right from application to when we hand over the house. The fingerprint capability should help us to authenticate, verify, and identify the applicant consistently throughout the system.
What about those that sit outside of the system at the moment? Those who don't qualify for RDP House, for instance, and what about, and how are you coming to terms with this mass influx of people from pretty much all over, it seems at the moment, into the province?
Yes, that's a very good question. You know, we have announced that as part of making Gauteng look completely different, turning our province into a construction site, that the way we are delivering houses is going to profoundly change. And one of those is we've got a majority of people that want houses, do not qualify, banks are rejecting them. When they come into our offices, what we do, we immediately turn them back because some of them would not immediately just from preliminary check, they just don't meet the criteria. So what are we going to be doing now is that with the new technologies that everybody that walks into our office and say, even yourself, anyone, I'm looking for a house. It could be that you want to build for yourself, you just want a stand because land is expensive, it's not available. So register everybody. Everybody that walks in and say, I need help, we should be able to register them, take all their biometric details. Then we can say to them, having profiled yourself, including income, where do you work, what money you receive, we then see if we can stream you into different products, because we no longer only help people who earn below 3,500.
Yeah.
There are many people. There's a new program that government has introduced. It's called Financially Linked Individual Subsidy. This means we partially subsidize you so that we can improve your discussions with the bank, minimize the risk criteria that the bank look at, and make sure that maybe you can easily get a bond with a low risk of default. So all that will be contained in our biometric data. So there's no person that will walk into our offices and simply keep them outside. So no one will be locked outside the system.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And I hope it works 100% so that we can send it all around the country. As everything that we do in Gauteng, we export, don't we? Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you very much, and looking forward to yet another opportunity to explain how the system works.
Well, we're going to follow through with it. That's the Gauteng MEC for Human Settlements, Mr. Jacob Mamabolo. We're talking about the new biometric system that's going to, well, it's going to put a roof over everyone's head in the province. Let's move abroad now. The Kamayani Express, on its way from Mumbai to Varanasi, derailed 30 kilometers from Harda late last night. Another passenger train, the Janata Express from Jabalpur to Mumbai in India, also derailed at the same spot. Here are some of the pictures and some of the comments that have been going around on social media with regards to this. Anil Sharma talks about people who live near the accident site played a big role in rescue efforts in the middle of the night with rescue teams. DJ LJ talks about prayers for those affected. These incidents should not happen. Need a major change. There you have a picture coming of that passenger trail. The entire railway track itself lifted off, it seems. There's a diesel engine that crashed. More pictures incoming. News Nation talks about Madhya Pradesh twin train tragedy shocks all. At the moment, the death toll stands at just over 20. 24 die, says Akansha Goldie, as two trains derail in Madhya Pradesh. It is very, very tragic what's happened there. Now, we move on to California, where the biggest and fiercest wildfire of the year has grown larger as it raged on for a 7th day now through drought-affected ranch lands north of the Napa Valley wine region. After jumping across a highway, the blaze, dubbed the Rocky Fire, has burnt through 65,000 acres now, destroying more than 50 buildings and displacing thousands of residents since erupting last week. Time for us to take another break. This is Newsroom on SABC News.
Welcome to Network, a technology news program that also discusses what's trending in social media in and around Africa. MTN has launched its new movie and television streaming service, Front Row. If it's trending, we will find it. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
Welcome back. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News. Let's take a look at the stories making headlines today. 3,000 ANC Women League members will today descend on Irene east of Pretoria for their long-awaited National Congress. The Congress will elect a new leadership for the organization for the next 5 years. It will also discuss issues including human trafficking, women in business, and the feminization of poverty. Arguments in the case between the National Assembly Speaker as well as the Hung, Cope and the UDM will continue in the High Court in Cape Town today. The applicants want Baleka Mbete to be declared unfit to hold office. And in central India, a rescue operation is now underway after 2 trains derailed within minutes of each other. More than 20 people have been killed in that incident. Well, remember, you can find all of those stories on our Newsroom Facebook page. Just remember to search for SABC Newsroom. You can also find us on Twitter at SABC Newsroom. Evan, back to you.
Thank you very much, Janine. Now, in an era of aging population and an increase in daily living costs, the spotlight has turned the attention on retirement systems around the world, and South Africans may be facing a retirement crisis. It is estimated that 60% of pensioners interviewed as part of a benchmark retirement survey do not have enough money to live on at retirement, and only 6% of South Africans are able to maintain their current lifestyle. The CFA Institute yesterday released an ideal retirement system report. Now, to tell us more, we're joined in studio by Philip Bradford, who's the president of CFA South Africa. Good morning, Philip. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Evan.
Interesting report. Just tell us what the key findings of this report is and what are the important mistakes that we make when planning for retirement.
Firstly, this is a global report, and retirement security was something identified by the CFA members as a risk to one of the greatest risks to most economies around the world, to most countries. South Africa has its own unique problems, though. As you've already stated, only about 6% of South Africans are actually able to retire comfortably. So the question becomes, how can we make changes here? And typically, you need 4 things in a pension system that allows for a sustainable pension system. Firstly, you need a strong government pension, and that's typically funded by taxpayers. Yeah. We have that already, but we know that those government pensions are very small. Internationally, you're looking for at least 25% of the average income for a retired person, a poor retired person, to receive as some form of retirement grant. But importantly, what you also need is a very strong compulsory private pension system. And this is something that the regulators locally are trying to implement. It was delayed last year. They're hoping to implement it this year or later next year. And that is effectively will cause the average South African who's employed to have to make a compulsory contribution to a private pension scheme. And then additionally, what you need is further saving that's incentivized. So, in other words, if you're making 1,000 Rand a month, you need to contribute a mandatory amount of about 8%. That seems like the global best standard to that private pension system. You then also need to be able to contribute additional amounts to that. And you see in countries like Singapore, as an example, their compulsory contributions are closer to 30%. Yeah. What they don't do, though, is they don't have a government pension that comes out of the tax system. And then what you also need over and above that is you need incentives to encourage people to save. So we've seen recently that in South Africa, the tax-free savings plan. Yeah. Now, at the end of the day, you and I, we are humans, and we prefer to spend our money rather than to save it. Yeah. So, and we can't go out there and tell people, listen, you must save, you're going to retire poor. You've actually got to incentivize people. You've got to put tax incentives in place. You've got to put compulsory systems that force that type of saving. And at the end of the day, those are the key 4 things that you need to have in place for a strong pension system.
South Africans don't save. That's what the Finance Minister says all the time, and we've got real challenges with that. We're quite fatalistic also in our approach to money, I think. But I want to ask you about some of the headline stories we see in the news. In recent times, the last couple of years, we see the collapse of retirement funds and the like. How does that play out, and how are these funds managed? Some say that it feels like they're playing casino with people's retirement funds.
We've actually got a very good track record in South Africa in terms of managing money and funds being managed. We've got a very strong regulatory system and a very strong governance in South Africa. You find that in global surveys when you look at our corporate governance, our tax collection, our financial systems are the top in the world. We come normally 1 or 2 out of in the global rankings. So if we compare South Africa to other retirement systems around the world and how they're managed, we show up very, very highly on the integrity and trust in the system and the governance around that. The problem we've got, though, is you can only manage the money that's in the system.
Yeah.
So there's not enough people contributing to that system. So we've got good regulations that govern how fund managers like myself actually manage that money, and the performance has actually been quite good. What you've seen if you look at South African investments, the stock market, as an example, has done very well despite the economy struggling. And one of the reasons for that is that a lot of the companies have diversified offshore, sometimes at the expense of jobs in South Africa, but pensioners and pension funds have benefited significantly from that. And you've seen ever since 2003 onwards, you've seen GDP growth in South Africa being driven by consumer spending. In other words, people have been spending probably more than they're earning. They've been borrowing money to do that. But the companies that have been benefiting from that, the owners of the pension funds, at the end of the day, you and I, have actually benefited from companies doing well and companies diversifying internationally.
We all learn from America how to spend money that we don't have, Philip. Unfortunately, that's the way of the modern world. Let's talk about the key mistakes that South Africans make right now when planning for retirement and with saving in general.
Well, firstly, because there isn't a compulsory pension system, we're not protected from ourselves. And not to sound preachy on that, but we really need a compulsory pension system that forces people to save. And once that money is in that system, it's amazing how you can survive, how you can get by once a certain amount's been put away. And South Africans, we've known as the worst savers in the world. It used to be the Americans. Unfortunately, we took them on and beat them at it. So unfortunately, when you do have disposable income and you've got access to debt, people tend to spend money on things that aren't capital goods. In other words, it's fine taking out a loan to buy a house, and you're able to service that because the asset can grow. But if you're taking out a loan to buy a car or to buy clothes, unfortunately, you're going to have to repay that at some point. And I always remember, even from our university days, if you draw 100 Rand, you're going to spend 100 Rand. So if the cash is not available, if it's saved, it's amazing how fulfilling that can be as well. And I think investing and saving is actually quite addictive. And once people get bitten by the bug, they get into it. But people need to be able to budget. They need to understand how these things work. Education is a big part of that too. Unfortunately, most people don't understand how investments work, how savings work, how financial planning works. And I would strongly encourage that at a very young age, right from primary school through to high school, through to university, there should be stronger education around these issues.
Around these principles. Quickly, you've got 20 seconds to tell us, if you could give us a number, what's the ideal amount that you should, of your salary percentage-wise, that you should put away every month?
Minimum 8%. If you're putting away 15%, which a lot of people balk at, that's a kind of figure that if you're doing that every month and you're saving it and investing that, you should be able to retire comfortably.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Philip Bradford is the president of CFA South Africa. We're talking about the money that we're not saving. We should save more. Otherwise, we will suffer in our old age, he says. We move on to the new employment legislation. Possesses liability for most employers employing temporary employees. Now, from the 1st of April this year, employers are required by law to appoint temporary workers as permanent employees following a 3-month continuous working period. Employers and labour brokers not complying with the new regulation face increased risk of unfair dismissal cases lodged against them at the Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration. That's called the CCMA here in South Africa. Employers found guilty of unfair dismissal could be fined up to 12 months' salary for unfair dismissal of temporary staff. Now, to talk us through this legislation is underwriting executive at the SHA Specialist Underwriters, Simon Coleman, who joins us from Cape Town. Good morning, Simon. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good morning to you too, Yaban.
Simon, just explain to us the changes to Section 198 of the Labour Relations Act. What does it mean to employers and employees for that matter?
Well, I think one really needs to look at the environment that these changes came about in. And you may remember, Yaban, that for quite a while now, the labour movement have been trying to get labour brokers in particular banned, saying that employees that were employed in this fashion really didn't have the same rights and the same protection that permanent employees had. And in fact, going one step further and saying that a lot of employers were using outsourced labour so that they didn't have to meet the obligations under the Labour Relations Act. And I suppose if one looks at it from that perspective, it's obviously quite noble because we're seeking to protect people. And the new amendments to the Act really look at employees that are earning less than 205,000 Rand per year. So it really is aiming at the more vulnerable employees. So what we've seen is the change really came through in January this year. And it says that temporary employees should really be exactly that. They should be temporary. So if you have a project that's running for 3 months, or there's an employee that's absent from work, let's say on maternity leave, and a temp is required on a temporary basis, then that would really be a truly temporary position. And the Act allows for that. What the Act is then saying is that employers shouldn't really be using the guise of a temporary position to mask what is effectively a permanent position. And that's really what the Act is, or what the amendments to the Act are seeking to address. So there's no outright ban of labour brokers, but there's certainly a greater focus on businesses saying, if this is a permanent position, then this person should really be employed permanently, rather than on a fixed-term contract or on a temporary employment services contract.
What recourses, or what's the rights of the employer now if he decides that he no longer requires the service of a temporary worker?
Well, look, if it's truly a temporary position, then at the end of that 3-month period, that position would fall away. So if we use the example of someone who's filling in for a lady that's on maternity leave, as she returns to work, the other position is no longer required, and that would come to an end. What you wouldn't be able to do, of course, is continuously renew the temporary contract for another 3 months and another 3 months, because the Act would say, right, this person is now permanent. And the impact on business is that, as far as the CCMA is concerned, they would deem that employee to be permanent as soon as that contract is renewed for another 3 months. So if it was decided that this employee was no longer suitable, they'd have to be dismissed following the same procedures as a permanent employee would be. In other words, in most businesses, there's a disciplinary hearing that takes place. Both parties are given an opportunity to make representations. And then, of course, after the dismissal, that employee would have the right to approach the CCMA.
What's the response from labour, organised labour thus far, and also what does it mean for labour brokers then in general?
Well, look, I think obviously labour would have preferred if there was an outright ban, but really this is probably a more balanced approach. From the labour brokers' perspective, it really means they have to relook at their contracts with their clients. They'll have to explain exactly how their employees fit into the organisation, because one of the other things that the amendments do is it says to the labour broker that those employees that are placed at a client really must be treated in the same way as the other employees once you go beyond that 3-month period. So one really needs to start looking at benefits, salary structures. All of those things would need to be explored and put into the temporary employment contract. But it's going to be very difficult for an employer to engage with a labour broker for a long period of time where the job is really the same and the people that are working there are really performing the function of permanent staff.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Simon Coleman is underwriting executive at SHA Specialist Underwriters. We're talking about, well, a new legislation around labour broking and the like. It's going to be tough to be turning over staff and to be dismissing them at will. Quickly, nearly 400 people were packed in an emergency shelters after Hurricane Sodelo ripped off roofs, and residents were left without power, water and services. Here, some of the comments, sending best wishes to our friends and colleagues at the CNMI who are recovering from Typhoon Sodelo. Relief effort to follow. Talking in hashtag Saipan, that is. Pox says Super Typhoon Sodelo is the strongest storm of the year. is taking aim at Taiwan and China, threatening damages, I would think. Still no water, and folks sound desperate, especially for the few hundred in shelters that can't flush their toilets. Hashtag Saipan. That's the typhoon that is now the biggest storm. There you have a picture. It's the biggest storm of the year so far. It's in the South China Sea. It's making its way towards Taiwan with lots and lots of devastation to follow. That's where we leave it, with a big storm today. Newsroom broadcast live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. The show, is also live on YouTube. That's via streaming and available on demand on our YouTube channel a little bit later. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We'll have it in the morning.